Alrighty, welcome back to Feature Fanatics. I'm Gal, and welcome back to yet another director spotlight here on the channel. Today, we're talking about a modern filmmaking icon who has gone through all the genres, but most importantly, he is sending all of us to the theaters this March with Dune Part 2. And joining me to talk about Denis Villeneuve is, first of all, a returning guest after joining us for our Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible talk. It is Lucas from Luke Reviews. How are you today, Luke?
I'm great. I'm fresh off a Dune rewatch just this morning, so I'm ready to discuss what is who's probably the best, if not the second best working director today.
And joining us for the first time is content creator and film YouTuber D Movie Man. How's it going?
Hey, good. Happy to be here. I think Denis has definitely shaken up the industry in a lot of positive ways, and I think given some of the frustration some of us may have with the state of cinema, I think it's great to see that we have a director who is still giving us something to really be excited for. So happy to discuss.
Yeah, so let's start with you. In order to start this whole great episode we have about this guy, what is it that we love about Denis Villeneuve?
Oh, I think what we love about Denis Villeneuve is that he is visionary. I know sometimes that can be a bit of a cliche to say, but I just think he's someone who gives us ideas and visuals, and he steps outside of the box. And I think when we, like I said before, when we look at the state of cinema and how we get a lot of things that seem to be more kind of dumbed down or watered down, or just a lot of things that don't, challenge us or kind of take us outside of our comfort zone. I think he is the director who is willing to do that, and to even challenge expectations in a way, and just showing that, with cinema as an art form, there's so much you can do with it, and there's so many ways you can visualize something. Even to use Dune as an example, even when you have a story or a world that's already set in place, just having a particular vision for it and being willing to examine that and really flesh that out, and bring a whole new audience in that can appreciate that, especially those who probably aren't familiar with the books or the original franchise.
Yeah, for me, Denis is an interesting one because a lot of directors, I could tell you exactly what I like about their movies, like your Nolans, your Tarantinos, but I don't know what it is with Denis. He just makes really good movies, and there's not one thing that I'd point to, but every time everything he puts out is it's like the best of the best, like quality wise, like visuals, scores. He gets the best uh, score writers and all that, and it's just solid. His movies are well paced, slow or faster, or just everything just up to the highest echelon. And I can't point to not one thing. He's just the best, or one of the best working right now. So I'm very excited to see more from him, I guess.
What I love about Denis Villeneuve is he's so singular. Like he's one of those that's rare to see on such a scale that we see him doing with Dune and so on. That's not only reliable, but he has full control of his craft. Like, I don't know what the politics are behind if he technically gets final cut privilege, but it is a Denis Villeneuve film whenever you watch it. And, always there's, if anything, about the unifying themes of his movies, is there anything to say about that? There is this underlying thing about whether you're watching Insandi or Sicario or even Dune. Um, there's something he has to say about how violence and betrayal is sort of this cycle. It's sort of always going to be as long as humans are to be. Like, it's a part of living in a human run society. But he also manages to capture the stillness within these moments of chaos and um, unimaginable things, whether it's even the wide shots in Dune or the way he sort of cuts to these bigger like helicopter shots when you're watching Sicario. Um, he's he's just got such a impeccable style, and he's worked now with some cinematographers and, like you said, composers. Johan Johansson or Hans Zimmer, that like some of these people that he's working with, whether it's the people on the cinematography or the score, or the visual effects, like when they're working on a Denis film that ends up becoming one of the staples of their career. So, and I remember watching press for the first Dune movie, and a lot of people, whether it was Josh Brolin or Dave Bautista or Jason Momoa or Rebecca Ferguson, were being asked what drew them to this project. And they all said, for me, it was Denis. That was what made me consider even taking this on. And maybe you would expect them to say something about the book and so on, but for them, it was always working with Denis. That's something awesome. So he really just elevates all the talents around him as well. All right, so I thought we should first get into our rankings of his films. So Luke, I'd like to start with you. Just give us from bottom to top, because I feel like his movies are so good, but also so unique that we may have very differing lists here that we can debate at the end. But Luke, give us your ranking of what you've seen of his. And
Yeah, so I'm a dirty scumbag who hasn't seen anything of his non-English stuff. So we're just gonna start there. At number 7, I have Enemy. I don't know. I just wasn't that hot on it. I'm not big for symbolism, like, oh, there's a big spider at the end. Great. Whatever. So I didn't really think much of that movie. Maybe it needs a rewatch. Maybe I'll get it more. But regardless, that's the only movie that I'm not like really positive on. Anyway, next I have Sicario. It's just a straight up banger. I've only seen it once, but I'm sure I will revisit it again. Just really very, very Denis. I think that's earlier Denis, but that's kind of laying the groundwork what his kind of, I guess, template
it's
might
so weird
be.
to think about now that 2015 is now considered early Denis. I'm not saying it's
I guess
wrong, but that's just funny
I
to
guess
think about.
early English Denis.
Sure.
Let's call it that.
No, no,
Then I
no.
have
But I get where you're coming from. Don't worry.
Yeah. Then I have Blade Runner 2049. When I first watched that, I wasn't really that crazy on it. I wasn't crazy on the first Blade Runner either, but this year I made an effort to like the Blade Runners more. I read the book that is based on it. I watched them both back to back, and I was definitely more positive on it. So now I get the 2049 hype. Number 4, I have Prisoners, which is just another straight up banger. His first kind of did it come out before Enemy? I think it came out before Enemy.
I think
Um,
technically, yeah. I think it came out a little
yeah,
bit before.
both 2013, but his first like big
I
English
think
movie
Enemy
with
came
big
out
name
in theaters
actors.
after Prisoners, something like that. But they both
Okay,
premiered at some festival. I don't remember.
but I watched
They
that a
premiered
few
in the same
times.
year.
I love the mystery and crime aspect of it. Then at number 3, I have Dune Part 1. When I watched it, I was like, okay, this is when I watched it, I didn't know anything about the world, and after I watched it, I wanted to know everything. I went and read the first 3 books. I haven't read the 4th one yet, but we'll get to that eventually. And then we get to Dune Part 2. So it's not my number 1. That's it's Part 2 is at number 2. It is one of the greatest filmmaking achievements ever. It has all the payoff that was promised in Dune Part 1. So I feel very satisfied that everyone who I was telling to just wait for Part 2, they are all satisfied. But at number 1, I have Arrival, which is honestly, it's become my favorite movie of all time. I just thought, okay, if
Wow.
sci-fi is my favorite genre, that does time travel in a very unique way that I haven't seen anywhere else. Um, we'll talk about performances. Amy Adams is perfect in it, and that's just perfect sci-fi that I want. And his next project, his next project, Rendezvous with Rama, is supposedly Arrival on steroids. And having read the book, it's very exciting to think about.
Well, that's a. We'll get into it, but solid ranking. Solid ranking. What about you? What's yours?
So again, I am someone else who has more to see with Denis. I'm really excited to see on Sunday. I thought I would have time to catch that one before this, but no. But I'm really excited to catch that one. But I would have to start with Prisoners, and I think Prisoners is really really solid. I think the cast is wonderful, especially some really surprise performances I wasn't expecting from certain people, like Melissa Leo. Very very shocked by certain developments and how the story progressed, and Paul Dano. And I appreciate it, but I guess I've also seen different variations of this story. So I think, and I also think that compared uh, to, I guess, these films where we have this massive world building and this massive scale, I appreciate the perspective of it, but it doesn't hit quite the same as the rest, even though I definitely appreciate the vision, the performances, how unsettling and dark, and just the places it goes, especially when it comes to being a parent and the lengths you're willing to go to, for your family, for your children. So I appreciate it. I just think, it probably doesn't hit quite the same as the other ones. So I'll start with that.
Mhm.
Next, I would have to go with Blade Runner 2049. Blade Runner is another one where I think it took time for me to appreciate it. And sometimes those have been the best experiences where I'm kind of like, oh, okay, this is cool, but it's not necessarily like, it doesn't hit me quite where it needs to. And then there are some films where that is my initial experience, and then I revisit, and I'm like, I really like. I don't know. I get something different and something new every time, and my appreciation for it grows. And so that definitely happened with the first Blade Runner, and that's been the same with 2049. I think when I first saw 2049, I was still kind of in a phase about the first Blade Runner, and so now just seeing, like I said, him being able to take that initial vision of the first film and expand upon that, and just add his own uh, kind of perspective to it. It was something I really enjoyed. Um, yeah, just a really awesome experience, fleshing that initial world out. Then I would have to go with Dune. I only had a limited experience with Dune as far as the initial story and the initial book. I remember my mom buying me the book, and I don't remember that much of it because I read it many, many years ago. But it was so unique. We've seen so many aspects or vision, so many takes on sci-fi, and Dune was the inspiration for Star Wars, and we've kind of seen where Star Wars has gone over time. And so it was nice to see just somewhat of a reset, and something just a little bit in contrast to what we know as sci-fi. It just felt like the Atreides, the Harkonnen, um, this idea of the Messiah and how that plays out within this world. The name is the Bene Gesserit sisters and all of that. It came together in a way I wasn't expecting. It was a little initially it was a little slower than what I was expecting, but I appreciated that, especially watching it a second time and then going into Doom Part Two, which is my next film. Just seeing that even pay off in the way that it has, and even the way Doom Part Two is going to set the stage for Doom Messiah, it came together perfectly. And the way then part two, I was able to rewatch the first one, and just seeing the foreshadowing and the things they were hinting at, and the way all of that hit differently watching again, it came together perfectly. So Dune, and then Dune Part Two, and I agree that Arrival was such a shocker because we all have our own expectations of movies, or what we might, I don't know what our initial thoughts of it might be. And I figured, oh, this might just be another alien invasion movie. I've seen a lot of those. And oh, the way it takes, not even just the time travel aspect, but even how it deals with language and interpreting language and disseminating language, and even that process to, from a writing perspective, and creating that, and really breaking that down, and seeing the characters learn and grow, and then what that means for the future and the world and those stakes, and even on a personal perspective, to see life, before it's actually happened.
Mhm.
So Arrival is definitely my number one. It was a shocker. It was emotional. It hit me in ways I did not expect. So that is definitely my number one.
I might have missed it. Did you mention where Sicario fits into your ranking?
So I didn't want to mention Sicario because I feel like when I saw Sicario, it wasn't a full appreciation for it. So it would yeah,
Okay.
because I feel bad. Because I feel like Sicario is a better movie than I actually give it credit for, and I didn't really get to have the best experience. It was like at an event, and there was a lot of talking, a lot of chatter. This was like a college situation. So I
Okay.
wanted to rewatch before I gave it. So technically, it would be maybe above Prisoners, but I feel like if I rewatch it, I'll
Fair.
on my own with my more mature movie experience, I'd feel differently about it.
Okay. So my number 9. I have 9 films on my ranking of Villeneuve. My number 9 is a movie I actually just watched today for this, which is Polytechnique, which is one of his earlier French films from 2009. It is a very well made movie, and I understand why it put him on the map. It was just too much for me. Like, I would never even want to think about it again, especially because, like, a film about like a mass shooting and seeing like a lot of the news, like just the state of the world now, it's a little much. And I'm someone who watches a lot of films with violence, so
Okay.
I was like, do I appreciate it? Absolutely, it's very well made, but I could not enjoy this. There were parts where I even found myself looking away or skipping because it's a lot. Number 8, I put Incendie. I know a lot of people will probably have this higher, but again,
Mhm.
there's just so much like violence in this one that's really like senseless, which I guess is very true to the experiences of some real people, um,
Mhm.
who have either been fortunate to escape or not fortunate enough to have perished in the horrors that are committed by the leaderships in these third world countries, and like the senseless violence that's committed, like even by family members on their own sisters, like if they betray their own families. Like, it's very senseless, but I think it's really well made. The parallel stories in it, and it's shot very well as well. I do think it deserves credit though. Number
Mhm.
7 is Enemy. I know it's number 7, but I do absolutely love it. Actually, um, I love a good thriller, and I love a good Jake performance. So 2 Jake performances, that's even better. And I kind of love how it's like both simplistic, but the ending has a lot to break down. So this is a bit of a two-parter. So I put number 6 Sicario and then number 5 Prisoners, but I am debating where I would put each one. I kind of go back and forth. I think Prisoners has the stronger script and is a little bit of a better realized final product, but I think Sicario, from the directing and cinematography perspective, it is, I think, one of the best directed and shot action movies I've seen in so long. And just how it shows, like I mentioned, like the cycle of war and senselessness and violence and corruption. Um, I know this one like is probably as violent as Incendi and Polytechnique, but I think honestly this is one that I'm like, it's been so long since I saw it in theaters that I'm itching to revisit it now because it's just so well made. And then Prisoners, like I said, again, well
Yeah.
shot from Roger Deakins, and just a handful of great performances and a tense story that you also feel the emotions on. Number 4, I put Dune Part 1. This is also one where I loved it when I saw it in theaters, but watching it again, I just appreciated all the little nuances in the world building and the story. Um, and of course, now with Part 2, there's even more to appreciate, even though we'll get to it. But I think Part 2 makes this one look like a joke in comparison, but that's not a duke on this. That's just talking about how good Part 2 is. Number 3, I put Blade Runner 2049. Just one of the most beautiful looking films in terms of visual effects and cinematography in the last couple years. And I love the script as well. I know the drama is a bit of a slow burn, but I love the mystery elements of the how it mixes crime noir and epic sci-fi, post-war, post-apocalyptic, dystopian questions about reality and intelligence. And I honestly love this one a lot more than the first Blade Runner. Number 2 is Dune Part 2. Um, we'll get into it more in our spoiler review that we're about to have in this episode. And then number 1, I honestly thought we would have different number 1s, but we all have the same number 1, and I love that. Arrival. Luke, you said it might be your favorite movie of all time. For me, it's on the top 20 favorite movies. It's just such a perfect film. I still remember watching it opening night in theaters, and that ending just left me sitting there. I had a similar reaction at the end of Dune Part 2, but wow, like talk about an amazing twist ending, and just every shot and every minute of that movie. Like, you talk about science fiction, we talk about even 2010s movies. Arrival just has everything I could want from a movie. That's my ranking there. I'm very
Well,
happy about
guess we all
going on
agree.
about
So that
Arrival.
means that is the objectively correct number one.
The object
Arrival.
also has the most. Actually, no, it's not the most Oscar nominated. I think Arrival's was nominated 8 times. Dune was nominated 10 times at the Oscars, and now part 2 will be nominated a billion times. No.
Yeah.
But I thought now we could go in reverse order and give our top 10 favorite performances in Denis Villeneuve films. As we said, he really elevates amazing cast members, including just terrific A-listers and actors that we like to cite as some of their best work when we talk about their careers. So I guess I'll start with this one. Number 10, I went with Jake Gyllenhaal in Prisoners. The reason I went with this one is I just love his portrayal of Detective Loki and the way he's sort of bent. He's pulled into this this dark journey with Hugh Jackman's character and really grows to care about um, doing justice and bringing these girls home. Number 9, I went with Rebecca Ferguson in Dune. I think, particularly in the first movie, she's kind of the heart, the beating heart, because she's conflicted between being, an Atreides and being a Bene Gesserit, but she also gives a lot to Paul in terms of his empathy, and even though there's conflict between them, and this goes darker places than the second one, but I think they do have a very good dynamic, especially when they're sort of alone in the desert, and how much she really protects him and would give a lot for him. Number 8, I went again with Jake Gyllenhaal in Enemy. I love how he managed to portray two characters in different morally ambiguous ways. I know I might have liked it a bit more than you guys, but at number 7, I went with Ryan Gosling in Blade Runner 2049. Big fan of just everything Ryan does, and this is no exception. At number 6, I went with Timothée Chalamet in Dune Part 2. But we could get more into that, into the spoiler talk, because I don't want to get too far into how good he is in this movie before we get into it. So now we could go to D. What is your 10 through 6?
Okay. Number 10, I'm going to go with Melissa Leo in Prisoners. Like I said, I've seen Melissa Leo in a few different films, but this one was a shocker for me. And just her rationale, just what you discover about that character and now it's revealed, just very unsettling, very shocking. Wasn't prepared for it, but she did a bang up job, and it's equally unsettling to know that there are people out there in the world who actually think this way. So yes, so definitely an unexpected one, but a great performance. I have to go with Charlotte Rampling in Dune. Well, I mean, technically Dune Part 1 and 2, but Charlotte Rampling is one of those actresses that just has such presence, and so, I don't know, like she just has this sense of dominance and authority, and having her, as basically the leader of the Bene Gesserit, and the scenes, and again rewatching after Dune Part 2, rewatching Dune Part 1, and having that experience, it's just like, yeah, those scenes just hit differently for me, and then knowing what basically the path that Paul is the path that's laid before him as a result of her interference and her conversations with him. I love those scenes, and I know they're a more subtle part of those films, but I think her performance is great. I'm gonna give number 8 to Oscar Isaac as the Baron. I know that again, this is a character that doesn't. We only get but a little bit.
No, it's
of
Duke
him.
Leto. He's not the Baron. Wait.
Excuse me. What did I just say? Why did I say the Baron? I am so sorry. The Duke.
He could have been a great Baron. I'm sure.
So sorry. Not the Baron.
He would have been
sorry.
a great Baron Harkonnen. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. But no, I'm sorry. As the Duke, House Atreides. But yes, I think that it's a subtle performance, and again, like I said, given what plays out with that character, we only get but so much. But again, greater appreciation for that performance after watching Part 2, and just what he represents as a father, as a leader who unfortunately gets caught in the middle of some very unfortunate circumstances. So yes, heartbreaking, but still very impactful performance. Let's see, 7. I would give that also to Jake Gyllenhaal as Loki in Prisoners. There's a lot going on in Prisoners, a lot of intensity, a lot of just very dramatic, in-your-face moments, and I think that he does a great job of bringing a sense of subtlety and level-headedness with all of the chaos that's going on there. So definitely have to give it to him for that role.
Yeah.
Six. I'm sorry.
It's your six.
Yes, and then six. I would have to give six to Hugh Jackman in Prisoners.
Fair.
Again, there's a lot of layers to that character and that performance. It's a lot, and we go on a journey as a concerned parent to other things, and it gets more and more intense and heartbreaking and sad and disturbing as we go on. But I think especially being introduced to Hugh Jackman in X-Men back in 2000, just seeing his progression as an actor and just seeing what that character represents and what he becomes as a result. And it's relatable and sad in some ways, but it's also disturbing and shocking in other ways. And just it makes you question like what lengths will a parent go to for their family. So I definitely have to give number 6 to Hugh Jackman.
Yeah. Great
Okay,
picks.
I'm
I love
gonna
that you
cheat.
shouted out. I was gonna say I love that you
Yeah.
shouted out Charlotte Rampling because she's very like outspoken. She's very like underrated in that Gom Jabbar scene. Like you said, that dominance that she has. And Oscar Isaac, this might honestly be one of my favorite roles of
Yes.
his, just because he's one of the really only like pure characters in Dune. He's very much a role model, like the kind of dad we would all aspire to be.
Yeah. Right.
All right, so I'm gonna cheat for my number 10 spot already. Sorry, guys. I'm gonna lump 3 Dune 2 performances together, and that's Austin Butler, Rebecca Ferguson, and Zendaya. They're in it at varying amounts of runtime, but their impacts are all quite similar in that sense. Austin Butler, he's not in it a lot, but he makes a great, really big impression. Rebecca Ferguson, after drinking the water of life, she just flicks a switch and she's just
Oh yeah,
incredible. And Zendaya is really sort of the moral compass of that movie. So, and she does a really good job of that. And she has a tennis movie coming out next month, so we'll see what happens
Challengers. Yeah.
there.
Well, Chani's also
Yeah,
a very
and
pure character, I would say overall.
Yeah.
in 9, of course, we're not going to mention all the great performances. We can only list so many, but I have Benicio del Toro in Sicario. It's a very Benicio performance. He's quite mysterious, but when he has to be intimidating, he is very intimidating. Like the bit towards the end, he's like prepare to meet God, or I think that was the line.
Oh my god, that scene! I think it's something.
and-
Yeah, it's prepare to meet God, something like that. Is his line.
and just that whole scene was just kind of. Sure, I watched it in bed on my laptop, but it was still very intense. Then I have Harrison Ford in 2049. Of course, we mostly know Harrison Ford as your action man, your Indiana Jones, but we forget that he can be a very good actor. Denis, of course, brings that out of everyone seemingly, and he's not in it as much as say Ryan Gosling is, but he's still a very impactful part of that film. At number 7, I have Jakey from Prisoners. Jake Gyllenhaal. He's a great contrast to Hugh Jackman's. Hugh Jackman's very angry. He smashes the sink and whatnot. But Jake's more composed, and he carries that film in a great way and takes you along with it. And in number 6, I have Javier Bardem in Dune Part 2. And he's sort of the how could I put this, sort of the not the metaphor,
He's a
but kind of like
cheerleader.
the representation of the Fremen overall. Like he starts off as Paul's friend, a kind of mentor, but by the end he's like a complete fanatic, and he's completely changed as a person. And of course, like you mentioned, he's funny in the beginning, but by the end he's very different to what he was, and that's a great performance. That's my number 6.
Yeah, really great picks, honestly. One of them is my number 5. I put Austin Butler in Dune Part 2. We'll get later how good he is, but he's so twisted and so delightful, and I just could not get enough of him. Number 4, I put Emily Blunt in Sicario. I know that a lot of people like to debate what her best performance is. I know she just got her first nomination this year for Oppenheimer. and a lot of people would debate whether she should have been nominated before that for A Quiet Place or Mary Poppins Returns. But I was always saying she should have been nominated here for Best Actress because she was so terrific, and she's sort of our view into this world, um, like the audience's perspective, because she's the only one who's like not really corrupt. And then going into number 3 is Benicio del Toro in Sicario. Again, I know he won the Oscar for Traffic, but this is actually my favorite Del Toro performance, and I know that was a big year for movies, 2015 when Sicario came out, but I think he should have been nominated. Personally, I would have loved to have seen him nominated. He was so dark and menacing, like you said, especially in those last 20 minutes. He's unforgettable, and I think that's the best acting that Del Toro's ever given. But I also think Sicario should have been nominated for Best Picture that year, to be honest. Number 2, I put Hugh Jackman in Prisoners. Again, I think after X-Men, or besides X-Men, he was still doing X-Men at this time, but besides for these big action movies, this may be the performance that defines him as an actor for a lot of people. You know, especially that car scene where he's giving it his all, or when he's hitting the hammer in front of Paul Dano. He has so many terrific scenes that must have been so exhausting, and he must have committed so much. And yeah, that's my 5 through 2.
All right. Number 5 for me is Paul Dano in Prisoners. I'm going to be very honest. Paul Dano is one of those actors that kind of scares me because he gets so into his roles that it makes me like just scared of him as a person. I'm like, like you play the places he goes when he plays some of these characters, this character, Riddler, and so many more. Yes. So it can be a catch, a bit of it can be a very layered experience watching his performances. But Prisoners, along with Hugh Jackman, and just the progression and the, I don't know, that character being caught up in at the core and being kind of at the center of what's happening there. Yes, I think he plays that well, and you kind of go from being angry and frustrated and feeling like, yeah, this is what you deserve, and then you get to a point where it's like, wait, are we going overboard? And well, maybe, like it's I just feel like he's just what he brings to that character. There are a lot of layers there, and I just, like I said, him along with Hugh Jackman, I just appreciated just what they brought to that film, and just then just the like I said, the progression of those characters. Next, I would say Austin Butler in Doom Part 2. I think definitely for anyone who thought that Elvis was just kind of a flash in the pan, or that was just kind of his one shining moment, he definitely he definitely came to knock all the naysayers out of the park and knock this role out of the park and bring it every time he was on screen. And this isn't a knock at Paul, but I'm like, I could have easily seen it would have been even interesting seeing it made me almost want to see like some kind of spinoff with just Fade Rotha, because he just brought such sadistic energy, such intensity. Every time he was on the screen, I was just like, man, couldn't take my eyes off him for a minute. And yes, and I was actually, we'll talk more about it, I know, in the spoiler review, but I was actually sad about certain developments because I had a lot more investment in that character than I thought I would. Next up, Harrison Ford in Blade Runner 2049. As was said, we know Harrison Ford for a multitude of roles, but we do forget about, just how impactful and how, I don't know, just how effective he is as a dramatic actor. And just seeing this character kind of in contrast or as a continuation of the first Blade Runner, that was something I was most excited for, especially upon revisiting it. And I just think it was such a, I don't know, just the way it tied both of those two films together. He was just kind of the one single chord through both that brought it together for me. So I had to give him his kudos for that. Next up is Rebecca Ferguson in, I guess, either Dune, but I would say Dune Part 2. Seeing again, I feel like I keep saying progression, but seeing the evolution, let's say, of that character in Dune Part 2, especially after everything that happens in the first, and even the foreshadowing in the first of what she will become in the second. It was, man, and I'm already a huge Rebecca Ferguson fan. I think she's underrated personally, but
Shout
yes,
out
just
Rebecca
seeing
Ferguson. Yeah.
Lady Jessica, just yes, seeing her become just this figure and what she is willing to do to push forward Paul's ascendance and all those things, especially, and also understanding that in many ways a mother will do anything for their child in a lot of ways, and what she's willing to do, and knowing what the future could be or will likely be for him. I think she played that perfectly. So Rebecca Ferguson.
Facts.
Okay, so my number 5 is Emily Blunt in Sicario. I think she really holds her own in that film. I haven't seen a lot of Emily Blunt dramatic performances. Of course, we know she's great in The Devil Wears Prada and Edge of Tomorrow, and like you
Yes.
mentioned,
There
Mary
was.
Poppins Returns. But Sicario is a really good performance from her.
Shout out Emily
Like you said,
in Devil Wears Prada. Yeah.
like you said, she's our sort of foray into that world. She's the only non-corrupt one. And number 4, I have Hugh Jackman in Prisoners. I don't know if you guys remember, but there was a time on movie Instagram that you could not escape that scene being posted when he's smashing the sink, and rightly
This
so.
time was
It's a
only like
great.
2 or 3 years ago or something.
Well, it feels like
For
far
like a
away, you
whole
know.
from the start of Instagram, I think, until like a year or two ago. I don't know.
But yeah, outside of that smashing the sink, he's really good in that role. And then you see him in The Greatest Showman, so it's like he can do it all. Then I have Ryan Gosling in 2049. I think he's basically in like every scene, so the movie's kind of on his back, and he brings a sort of humanity, even though he isn't human, to that character, which I thought is really good. And of course, he has that scene where he freaks out, and it's been memed
I
to
love
hell,
that.
but it's still very good.
I love
It's
that.
hard to do it's hard to do rage well in acting, I feel, but he did that really well. And it hurts for me to put this at number 2, but I'll explain my number 1 more. At number 2, I have Amy Adams in Arrival. Um, Similar to Ryan Gosling, she's almost in every scene, and you guys mentioned understanding the language part of it. That's one of my favorite aspects of the movie, and she kind of guides us through that, and she grows more knowledgeable about the subject. Yeah, I just love seeing people in movies be really good at what they're taught to do. So, and
Yes.
she does that well.
I'll continue off of that because I put Amy Adams at number 1 in Arrival, and I still don't know how she wasn't nominated for the Oscar. I was really mad that she wasn't because, I know how extra she is in American Hustle. I love her in that movie. I love her in Doubt and Vice and all the other films that she was nominated for. But particularly in uh, in Arrival, there's something so human to her. There's something so heartfelt and commanding. She shows how like this is one of her less extra roles. She's not really shouting or yelling or doing anything like in to like beg like an Oscar clip, but she's really carrying this movie with such empathy, and the scenes where she is learning more things and she has to make this internal choice, and just how her arc comes together. We see it a bit in the opening minutes, and then how that progresses. I just think it's such a beautiful role. Definitely more subtle than some of the other performances that we've shouted out, but it was easily my number 1.
Yeah, I was gonna say same thing for me, and I'm not just saying that because it was my number 1 film, but I do think it is just a
Mhm.
performance that just ties the film together perfectly. And even like I said, it's the way I appreciate the beginning of the film and what she said, and what Louise says at the beginning about the way she sees time and what it can what is perceived as a beginning versus an ending and all that, and understanding what that really means once you've seen the film at least once and then revisiting it. I think just this what that character experiences, what she goes through at the initial stages of um, of what she represents as far as language and her understanding of that, and then how she ends up being, the the genuine savior of humanity, because she's the one person who can reach these beings and understand, and even just how her understanding begins to expand the more she talks to them and communicates with them and sees her future and just begins to, like, I don't know, just the evolution of the character and where she goes at the end and the decisions she makes, even knowing what it'll mean in the future, which is,
Yeah.
heartbreaking and powerful and so many things. So yes, I had to put Amy Adams at my number one because, like you said, it's a performance that is impactful without necessarily having to be showy. And showy isn't always a bad thing, but it has impact in such a quiet, powerful way.
Yeah, so I almost put Amy at number
Oh
one,
yeah, I'm
but
on edge now. Who's it gonna be?
I decided to go with one Timothy Chalamet in Dune Part 2.
Okay.
So for most of the first movie and up until he drinks, that I mostly saw, okay, Timothy, he it's still Timothy the actor, but after that there flicked the switch when I saw Paul Atreides come to life. Like, okay, that's what I read in the book and that's what I'm seeing on the screen. It's like it's just like the actor became the character, and you really don't see that often. You got like your Heath Ledgers who, the makeup helps, but he's really just doing the voice and all the shebang. But Timothy Chalamet became that for me in the third act, and that's whole segment, like, I think that solidified him as one of the best young actors working today. And he's gonna get just so much more work continuing off of this. But yeah, that third act solidified as the best performance in a Villeneuve film for me.